And, we got a little echo here. Uh-oh. Do we still have the echo?
Hello, you sound all
Hi.
right to me.
Can you guys hear me?
I
Does
hear
it
you.
sound like an echo?
No, no.
I guess it's just me then. Maybe I'll put this away from me.
Echo. There's no echo, Mignon.
Thank you, Chair Brazil. So if we could have our seats, we're going to get started in a few minutes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Ms. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chair Jim Roosevelt. We ready? So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's meeting of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. I am Mignon Moore, and along with Jim Roosevelt, we serve as co-chairs of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. I'm delighted to be here with you today. Jim had another obligation and is unable to join us in person, but he is joining us virtually to provide periodic guidance and inform our conversations. Now, before we begin today, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the next item on our agenda is to call the roll. As always, I would like to note for the record that this meeting is open to the public and live stream. Please be sure to state your name and state before speaking for our court reporter. I'll now ask our parliamentarian, Helen McFadden, to call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Alex has given his proxy to Mr. Wynn. Ms. Andrews?
Here.
Mr. Applebaum?
I'm here.
Ms. Blanco? Ms. Brazil? Ms. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Buckley?
Here.
Ms. Campagna-Wheaton? She's here. Yeah. Ms. Cardona?
Presente.
Mr. Carnahan? Ms. Conrad?
Here.
Ms. Daughtry has given her proxy to Ms. Schwecker. Mr. De Villa Pernas?
Here.
Ms. Davis? Here. Mr. Devermont? Here. Ms. Dingle? Ms. Dowdell?
Here.
Ms. Dugarala?
Here.
Mr. Elridge?
Here.
Ms. Fowler? Here. Ms. Free? Mr. Goodman? Here. Ms. Hernandez? Here. Mr. Hicks?
Present.
Mr. Wynn? Here. Ms. Kmart?
Presente.
Mr. Cap?
Here.
Mr. Kerrigan?
Here.
Ms. Klebb?
Here.
Mr. Leone?
Here.
Ms. Lewis? Ms. Lopez Franson?
Presente.
Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Ms. Monroe Moreno? Mr. Munoz?
Here.
Mr. Marib?
Here.
Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Seltzer?
Here.
Mr. Shea?
Here.
Ms. Spain? Here. Mr. Spate?
Here.
Ms. Schwecker? Here. Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Treiber,
Here.
Mr. Unamoto? Ms. Verret? Mr. Washington?
Here.
Certainly have a quorum.
Thank you, Helen. Members, per our charter and bylaws, a quorum is 40% or 20 members, present in person or by proxy. I'm pleased to report we have a quorum, and thank you all for being here today. We're excited to be joined again by a former colleague on the Rules and Bylaws, our DNC Chair, Ken Martin. Before we begin the business, I would like to welcome Chairman Martin and invite him to offer a few words to the committee.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Moore, and of course, Chairman Roosevelt. And thank you to all of the committee members for being here today, and of course, your important work and all of the many hours. I believe our team said close to 40 hours, maybe even more now, of time spent over the last year in this conversation. So thank you for all of the deliberations and all the good conversation. I don't usually read my remarks at events like this, but I want to make sure that I do, because I think it's important, of course, given the importance of the work at this meeting here. I want to make sure that I choose and use the right words, so forgive me if I'm reading a bit of this. But look, I want to restate something that I promised when we were running for chair. I believe in all of you and your ability to build the best calendar to nominate the strongest possible Democratic candidate for president in 2028. We've talked several times about the unfortunate ending of our process 4 years ago, and we did a lot of really good work, but had the outcome dictated to us in the end. I promised all of you, and certainly when I ran for this position, that this wouldn't happen again this time. And I'm proud that this committee is going to work together as a group to get us across the finish line. But I would be remiss if I didn't share some of my beliefs with all of you before we get into this important discussion. And it's important to recognize on the outset, thanks to reforms that I brought forward, that this committee is both the largest committee with the most number of members it's ever had. It's also the most geographically diverse, the most racially diverse, and more important, for the first time ever, a committee that has directly elected representatives from all of our various constituencies and organizations that our party serves. And that, it's important to note as we make this decision, that this decision isn't made by a bunch of hand-picked insiders. That this decision is made by people, some who've served on this committee for years, many new members who are serving for the first time, and many who are elected by people to represent their voices on this committee. So I want to say this, of course, in addition to making sure that we had a robust and diverse committee with different viewpoints. We also set forward in this process to make sure that what guided us in this decision always was 3 really important North Star principles. And as I've made it very clear to this committee many times, my job is not to put my thumb on the scale and to dictate to this committee or to anyone else what the calendar should be. That is a decision this committee will make. But certainly, I wanted to make sure that what guided us in this important decision was important principles. And those 3 principles, just to reiterate again, were that this process is rigorous in the sense that it battle tests our eventual nominee with key parts of our coalition and, of course, key parts of this country to make sure that whoever emerges is in the strongest possible position to win the presidency. Second is that it's efficient, that whatever calendar we put forward does not deprive our eventual nominee of much-needed resource later in the calendar. We shouldn't bankrupt our nominee in the early part of this calendar and this process. And third, that it's fair. Not just fair to the candidates themselves, but fair to their supporters and fair to Democrats across the country who want to be heard in this process. And thank you for your work in letting those North Star principles continue to guide the decisions of this committee. I also pushed hard, as you know, and I want to thank you all again for your work in ensuring that we had an open and fair and transparent process. It was critical as we said, that every state who wanted to be a part of this process had an opportunity to be heard, to present their case. And I think we're better off for not only listening, but truly actually engaging each of them in conversation and making sure that we heard them out. And so I want to say this with the utmost respect for different views on this issue. I agree with the views expressed by many on this committee that this decision needs to be made this work and affirmed by the DNC at the August meeting. We have been very deliberate about timing the major components of this process to ensure that it is above reproach. We worked to pass a robust package for Rule 21 before we knew which states we would and would not be choosing. Now we have to select these states before we know which candidates are going to be in the race. Our rules require that the full DNC vote to ratify the Rule 12 waivers approved by this committee. So if this isn't done in time for our meeting in Austin in a few weeks from now, our next opportunity to get them approved will not be until early next year, at which point there will be candidates already in the race. I firmly believe, as your national chair, that making this decision now, before there can be any accusations of impartiality, is critically important. The integrity of this work must be our highest standard, and that means getting this done now. And second, as I said before, I believe we need to add a fifth state to the early calendar. I've talked about this extensively. We need to have an eye to the future of the electoral map and skate to where the puck is going. In 2030, the census is going to take the puck to the south and to the southwest, and that's why I believe the fifth state that receives a waiver needs to be from the south. And third, that we ratify this resolution, in our resolution, I should say, the idea that we will revisit this decision, again, every 4 years. Whatever calendar we put in place today should not be a calendar for the next 40 years. This should be a decision that's revisited every 4 years, so we reflect where our party's at, where we're growing, and the changing nature of our party. We can never abide by a calendar that's been set for 30 and 40 years, and it's just commonplace. Our party is growing, the map is changing, and we should revisit this conversation. And finally, this is a more personal ask. I know we all have our perspectives and vested interests. I'm not asking any of you to forget them or ignore them. What I am asking is that as you go through this process, you think about what is best for the party and what decisions will yield the best candidate possible to take back the White House in 2028. I know you will do this, and I'm thankful for your work. I ask all of you, of course, many of you are quite vested in the outcome of this decision. But respect your colleagues, respect the people around this room, respect the Democratic voters who are watching all of us right now with keen interest in not just the decision we make, but actually how we make this decision. We're all in this together. We're all on the same team. And the decision we make today will have historic consequences. As what you're about to do over the next 2 days will chart a course for not just our party, not just our eventual nominee, but when we win the White House for the next President of the United States. Thank you all for the work you've done already. Thank you for the work you're going to do these next 2 days. And Chairwoman Moore, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd just like to add, the chairman laid out some of the things that we'll be discussing tomorrow and robust around the calendar. So thank you for previewing it for the members today, Mr. Chairman. So before we begin, on behalf of Jim and myself, I would like to thank each of you for your service to the committee. I think I've said this over and over again. I have not met a more dedicated group of people who give, public service is something that's very important to me, but you all have redefined the word public service. So I really want to thank you publicly for committing your time to this committee and really taking this work very, very seriously. I mean, I know everybody comes up to me and say, oh, this is my second job. No, this is your first job today. And so I appreciate all that you have done for Jim and I and for the chairman, so thank you very much. I also want to recognize the team who works behind the scenes to make sure these meetings run smoothly. In addition to Helen, And we are grateful to the staff and interns of the Office of the Secretary and Party Affairs. This includes Sham, Rick, Will, Emma, Zoe, Elizabeth, and Jeremy. Thank you to Jimmy and Mike, the DNC's IT department, for making today's live stream possible. We also want to give a big thank you to the DNC leadership team, including Raja, Jessica, Nick, and DNC Council and 11. Our sincere thanks to everyone for helping make these meetings run smoothly. As the chairman has already indicated, over the 10 months, we have gathered for 8 public meetings that have spanned more than 70 hours regarding this work. This work has resulted in the 2028 delegate selection rules, which are the main rules governing how delegates for the convention are selected, and the 2028 call for the convention, which provides for the allocation of delegates and the rules for the convention that our committee should complete today. Jim and I have said before, we cannot express enough the deep appreciation and commitment you have made to participate in this process. And I know a lot of members are new, but I also want to thank them publicly as well, because they have taken this work incredibly serious, asked very thoughtful questions, many questions, and we of that work too. In Pittsburgh, we completed our review of the 2028 delegate selection rules, and we began our review of the proposed 2028 call for the convention. Our agenda for today's meeting will be centered on the remaining portions of the proposed 2028 call for the convention, which we are hoping to complete. We will save time at the end of any items of the call that members might have and would like to revisit. Following our committee's completion of the call, we will consider a proposed resolution regarding the formation of DNC caucuses from the DNC Charter and Bylaws Working Group. With that, let's get started with the review of Article 4 of the 2028 call for the convention. Staff, could you please display this section on the screen? Coming back to Article 4F, which was postponed during the last meeting, before we begin the discussion, Sham will provide a brief overview of Article 4 and explain the amendments before us for consideration.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Members, Article 4 details the process for certifying a state's delegation, including the pledged and automatic delegates. It also outlines the replacement procedure for pledged and automatic delegates, provides for the selection of a delegation chair and delegation pages to the National Convention. As you all remember, Chairman Martin proposed increasing the base number of pages for each state from 3 to 4, and for the territories from 1 to 2. In order to do that and to get the math to work, we have come back with a proposal for your consideration. If we could screen share the proposed amendments, and I can run through those. We're getting there. So this begins with Article 4, Section F, and removes the base convention pages of 203, and instead just has a specific section for how pages should be allocated to the 57 delegations. As the chairman has recommended, increasing the base number of pages that each state, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico shall have from 3 to 4. And then providing one additional page to any state with 75 or more delegates for every 50 delegate votes that they do possess. It also increases the number of delegates allocated to the territories of American Samoa, Dems Abroad, Guam, the Northern Marianas Islands, and the Virgin Islands from 1 to 2, while also increasing the number of pages that the national chairperson may select from 25 to 35. The guiding principle here was to find a formula that worked to make sure that every state delegation received at least one more page than they did for the 2024 cycle.
Thank you, Sean. The floor is open for a motion on the amendments. Is there a motion? Is The amendment has been moved and there's a second. Is there further discussion? David?
I just have a quick question on Section B that begins one additional page. If a state has 100 delegates, does that section mean that they get an additional 2, or does it mean that they get an additional 1 because they're over 75?
They get an additional 2. So there's a first calculation of, do they have more than 75? And if they have more than 75, then they get the additional 1 per 50 that they have. We did try this initially with a 100 delegate threshold, and what ended up happening is I think we had 7 or 8 states that received no change from the 2024 cycle, and we didn't feel like that met the spirit of what the chairman was trying to achieve.
Elaine?
I may have missed something, but why are we doing this?
This was a recommendation from our chairman
Because?
to add, well, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, tell me.
Because, and I'm sure President Klebb will also speak to
Yes.
this, each state party right now, it is very difficult to pull off these conventions with just 3 people on the floor, 3 pages. And it is, the demands of these delegations require more help, and we don't have enough badges. We're not given staff badges, they're not giving, the pages basically are their staff on the floor, managing huge delegations. And so this is not, these folks, they don't have seats, they're running around the whole time. They essentially are working for the delegation, and we need more help on the floor. And so this is something, as you remember, Elaine, I have pushed in the past. And we actually were successful the last time in increasing it, but the demands are so much that I believe state parties have been very supportive of this effort in the past, and it's just a necessity now, given how large these delegations are and how intensive these conventions are for the week. I'll let Jane maybe speak to this more as well, but it's just something right now that I don't believe we can go into the next convention with, unless we're going to start allowing state parties to have staff on the floor. These pages, most of them younger pages, are the folks that are running around doing the work for the delegation.
Yeah, and if I can just continue where the chair, left off. For example, in Chicago, when we had some of the buses that got stopped because of either protests or security reasons, and we had older delegates that were literally walking the streets of Chicago, our pages were the ones, because we needed to have our delegates on the floor for votes, our pages were the ones that we sent out to get the older delegates, to get them safely into the building. They're the ones who get water, do logistics, help our delegates with accessibility issues. And so even with a small delegation like Nebraska, we needed more hands because we didn't have staff that were able to be on the floor except our one staff member that's allowed a badge. So having an additional person, if you're a small state, and obviously more if you're a larger state, will just help with the pure logistics. This will also mean less of us harassing DNC staff, because I think DNC staff were tired of the state parties going to the DNC logistics team asking for assistance.
Is there any further discussion? Elaine, is your?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know.
Okay. Your table 10 was still up. I didn't know if you want to be recognized. So before we conclude, any more proposed amendments for Article 4F? Thank you, everyone. Oops. Who? Michael? Kat?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I sent an amendment to staff, if they can pull it up.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Thank you all. This language grows out of conversation that we had at our last meeting in Pittsburgh, where Leo Daughtry raised the need to strengthen the section to make sure that our pages reflect our affirmative action, diversity, and inclusion goals, both at the state level and with the DNC chair's appointments. Further, she felt rightfully that we should do what we can to ensure that pages and page opportunities provide an entry to our national convention to the youngest members of our party. I completely agreed, so I drafted the language that you see before you today, which she has since reviewed and approved. I do want to be clear, though, this was her idea, and while she's not here today, I'm pleased to carry it forward for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so is there a motion on the floor for this?
Make a motion.
Second? Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there further discussion? Okay, if there's no further discussion on ups. Barry?
Not a discussion on the amendment, which I support. I just wanted to make sure I understood that what's in our packet, Appendix C, is if this motion passed, that's the new 251 is the new amount of pages. I'm just trying to make sure that this is the current or the updated version, this appendix.
Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. That concludes our review. Oops, wait a minute. Yes, we are going to vote on it, but I just wanted to make sure we concluded our discussion on it. So all in favor of Article 4? Those opposed? The ayes have it, so the staff will update the materials based on our discussions. Move on to Article 5. Moving on to Article 5, which addresses the management of the 2028 Democratic Convention operations. Before we begin our discussion, Sham will provide a brief overview of Article 5.
And members, it was noted to us that we may have skipped one or two sections as we were going through this in Pittsburgh, and so we wanted to make sure that you all had the opportunity to review and provide comment and amendments if you so desire. As a reminder, Article 5 outlines the management of the National Convention logistics, including housing, floor access, floor setups, media, security, and financial reporting.
Thank you, Sham. Members, the floor is open for discussion and amendments as we review the sections not covered during our Pittsburgh meeting in chronological order. We will now pick up Article 5C, Section 7, on the communications. Are there any proposed amendments or questions? Moving on to Article 5C, Section 8, regarding facilities for presidential candidates. Are there any proposed amendments or questions? Moving on to Article 5C, Section 9, regarding facilities for news, media, and press seating. Are there any proposed amendments or questions? Mm-hmm. Elaine?
Yeah, just let me go back for a second to 8.
Okay.
The presidential candidates, a fair and equitable system. I'm assuming that would take into account the strength of the presidential candidates in the convention itself. Having just heard that somebody suggested we already have 29 presidential candidates, I don't, you can see a real mess happening if some people with 10 delegates or something, demand space, et cetera. So I'm assuming that will encompass, but I want to make it clear that, candidates must have a substantial, representation in the convention before we're giving them space.
Any further discussion? Thank you, everyone. That concludes our discussion, so we'll move to a vote on Article 5. All in favor, say yea. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We're now moving to delegate and alternate allocation. Moving on to Appendix B, before we begin our discussion, we will provide a brief overview of Appendix B.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Appendix B is the allocation of delegates and alternates. Please note, pursuant to the delegate selection rules previously adopted by this committee, not later than March 8th, 2028, the Secretary of the Democratic National Committee shall officially confirm to each state Democratic chair the names of the following automatic delegates who legally reside in their respective state and who shall be recognized as part of the state's delegation.
Thank you, Will. The floor is open for discussion and amendments as we review this section in chronological order. We will now begin our discussion on Appendix B. Do members have any proposed amendments for Appendix B? Yeah. Thank you, everyone. That concludes, oops, did somebody have something? Oh, okay. That concludes our review of Appendix B. Staff will update materials accordingly based on our non-discussion. Thank you very much. Okay. So we're going to move on to Appendix C. Before we begin the discussion, Sean will provide an overview.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appendix C covers the allocation of pages, and this does reflect the changes that you all just did approve. One thing just to note for everyone, the delegate selection rules require that the Secretary certify the names of the automatic delegates to each state, and as you approved, that date is March 8th of 2028. These allocations are built off of the total number of delegate votes for each individual state, so these are obviously all temporary until we get the final list that the Secretary certifies to the states in 2028, and then we will send out updated numbers to each individual state party as anything changes.
Thank you, Sean. The floor is open for discussion. Frank?
On that, too. The list of delegates doesn't include, obviously, the bonus delegates that might be awarded later. We decided to stick with bonus delegates last meeting, and so that will also change based on bonus delegates.
Any more discussion on Appendix C? Thank you, everyone. That concludes Appendix C. The next section we'll cover is allocation of standing committee members. Appendix D, before we begin our discussion, Sean will give us an overview.
Again, members, very similar to Appendix C, that this will be finalized once we have the total number of delegate votes for each individual state party. But we wanted to make sure that you were able to see it and to, I guess, as a package, approve it temporarily, knowing that this is going to change once we lock in the size of each delegation.
Members, the floor is open for discussion on Appendix D. Okay, moving right along. That concludes our section on Appendix D. The next section is presidential candidate written affirmation. That's Appendix E. Will deliver an overview.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. As you said, Appendix C is the presidential candidate written affirmation. This document is where individuals publicly announce their candidacy for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States in 2028 and attest that they are a member of the Democratic Party.
Members, the floor is open for discussion on Appendix E. David?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I needed to actually move the amendment that we discussed last time. But at lines 18 to 20, what's on the board is language that I propose to add to the affirmation that would make clear for any reader of the delegate selection plans and any reader of posted affirmations from candidates that they are in fact aware of the serious sanctions that we decided to adopt last time, that they are responsible for their campaigns, that the general excuse of, oh, I didn't realize my staff was doing that is not going to work going forward. So I just suggest we add it in for clarity.
So, Frank, are you offering that as, I'm sorry, David, are you offering that as a motion?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Second, okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Wendy?
No, ma'am, I put my sign up before David made his motion. I was just going to make the motions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Seeing no further discussion, we can move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let's see. So now we will come to our final order of business. Oh. Yep. So this actually concludes, quite frankly, the review of our call for 2028. So you should congratulate yourselves. I know, right? So members, thank you so much. Is there any further discussion? Carol?
I just have a question, going back to the members of the standing committees. In the past, I think the DNC chair has had appointments to those committees, has made appointments to those committees. That's not included in this total?
No.
Should we set that, or does the chair just get to do whatever he wants, which is okay with me, but I mean, we just haven't addressed that when we talked about these numbers.
Well, is it in the call? It's in the call.
Yeah, it's in the call, Carol, under standing committees and on platform rules, credentials, talks about the membership, the base, and then the PLEO members, 25 members that that the DNC chair gets to appoint to each of those standing committees.
That's fine. So the DNC chair, 25 members to each committee. 25 members to each committee, is that right, Jason?
That's what I'm reading here, yes, on page 8.
Yeah,
That's what,
to the three
it has
standing
been that in
committees.
the
Okay.
past. I don't think it's been increased under the new chair. Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to ask for a motion to recommend that this document as amended to the full DNC for approval. All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the call will be presented to the DNC members. Our next item of business will be to consider the proposed caucus caucus recognition resolution that was recommended for review by the Charter and Bylaws Working Group. And Frank, I'd like for you to recognize the members of your working group before you begin to speak. So if you'd like to recognize them for all the hard work they've done, I turn the floor over to you.
Yes, I'd like to recognize my co-chair, the co-chair Susan Swecker, and if Sham could go through the list of everybody else, that would be helpful, because I don't have the list in front of me, and I want to make sure I don't miss anybody.
I have it.
All right. Thank you, sir. The list of the members of the working group, co-chaired by Frank Leone and Susan Swecker, include Cristobal Alex, Maria Cardona, Russ Carnahan, Bishop Leah Daughtry, Carol Fowler, Elaine K. Mark, Yvette Lewis, David McDonald, Henry Munoz, Shad Murray, and Andre Washington.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
So this was a working group that was appointed to look at various charter and bylaw issues, and we've met a number of times. We've looked at some issues. We've come to a conclusion on one of the issues, and we're reporting on it now. We'll be concluding our work this fall and reporting on the remaining issues at that point. This is a requirement of the charter that the Rules and Bylaws Committee conduct every cycle review, and so that's what we're doing. The resolution that we have that's in your package talks about caucuses. Now, the Democratic National Committee has caucuses which support the party's electoral efforts by expanding its reach to specific constituencies and communities, providing a voice for those communities within the DNC, increasing the DNC's organizing capacity, and supporting DNC programs and priorities. And the caucuses that we currently have consist of the Asian American and Pacific Islander Caucus, Black Caucus, Disability Caucus, Hispanic Caucus, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer American Caucus, Native American Caucus. And so, but these caucuses also require commitment of significant resources. And so there are a couple of questions. One is, what criteria are there for caucuses? And then secondly, what is the process for recognizing caucuses? Now, the criteria we've been working on was adopted by a working group in 1991, chaired by Vice Chair Lottie Shackelford. And that set out certain criteria, but it didn't set out a process for actually recognizing caucuses. It was just, if you met the criteria, then you might be a caucus, but there really wasn't a process. So what we're trying to do here is set up a framework, have a process for new caucuses going forward. And so for the new caucuses, the criteria would be that the group must be a significant constituency of the Democratic Party, composed of DNC members who share an inherent and/or immutable trait which defines the caucus, which may not be a shared belief or set of beliefs or concern about an issue or cause. The group must represent 5% of the DNC membership, must have a history of being severely and systematically underrepresented within the Democratic Party and in Democratic Party politics as a whole, and it must not already be represented by an existing caucus or continuing council. Did we add the additional language? Okay. And then so once a group meets that criteria, they can submit an application signed by at least 15% of the DNC membership, including their charter and bylaws amendments and their bylaws. And then it goes to the Rules and Bylaws Committee, which would then present a recommendation to the DNC to recognize the caucus or not recognize the caucus. This resolution doesn't affect existing caucuses, so all the caucuses that I just read, there's no change as it relates to them. We also have constituency groups that are called councils, and there are differences. The councils don't have to meet the same criteria about immutable or inherent traits, and caucuses typically get a seat on the executive committee. Councils do not. So our current councils are Council on the Environmental and Climate Crisis, Interfaith Council, Labor Council, Poverty Council, Rural Council, Small Business Council, Veterans and Military Affairs Council. In addition, there's the Youth Council, the Young Democrats of America, the College Democrats of America, and the High School Democrats of America. And so this resolution doesn't affect any of those groups. This is just limited to new caucuses that may be seeking recognition. So with that, I'd like to move adoption of the resolution, and I and other members of the task force would be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Frank. Members, the floor is open for discussion and amendments. As we're going to review the document in chronological order through each whereas, and therefore be a resolved clause. Yvette?
Thank you, Yvette Lewis, Maryland. I just want to be clear that this is just a framework for new caucuses. This is not an open invitation for caucuses to come flooding in, but it is a framework so that if new caucuses do come in, we have everything in place. And I just want to be clear that that's what this is about. It's not an open invitation for every caucus in the world to come flooding into the DNC, but we do have this process in place which has not existed before. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
That's correct.
Thank you. Jamie?
I was going to make an amendment at 1C, but I can wait till we get there if you want to go line by line.
Okay. Just keep scrolling up, if anybody. Barry?
Thank you. I just, I support what we're trying to do here, but in number 3, if a caucus application must include a signed statement of support of at least 15% with representation from each of the 4 regions, I think that you're talking 15%, you're talking 60, 70 members of the DNC. I don't have a problem with that. But what if somebody had, all right, for instance, you needed 63, so you have 60 from the east and 1 from each of the other regions, and you've got this covered. I think there should be some minimum, maybe 2% from at least each region, or something that requires that the teeth of this particular 4 regions to mean more than just having representation, which could be 1 from 3 regions, and you fill in the 4th. So that, I'm just throwing that out for discussion.
So Barry, we're going to, once we get to section 3, we will come back to you on that if you don't mind. Okay, thank you. Alicia?
Alicia Andrews from Oklahoma. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question isn't necessarily about this, but what happens afterwards, right? So they get a seat on the executive committee, but this is also deal with the appointments. Do they also now get a vote to nominate people to the DNC? And what does that do to that number?
Try to address that.
That would require a separate charter amendment to address that specific issue.
Right, that's why I'm mentioning it, because on item number 4, it talks about making sure that we address all of the charter changes, and I just needed to name out loud that that is a charter change that needs to be discussed and thought about on a wide-ranging thought, because it's not just about adding recognition to different constituency groups.
Jane?
I am a strong advocate for us really thinking about this in a much more in-depth way. I think we have to strongly consider that women's, Black, Latino, Native, AAPI, Stonewall are our caucuses, period, end of story. Any other constituency group that wants to create a group is a council. I just don't think it is appropriate that we start to create different avenues for different constituency groups to become caucuses. They can become a council, and there is a space in our beautiful, big, diverse tent and coalition for rural and environment and all the other groups. But they are councils, Labor Council, Youth Council. We have core caucuses that make up our born traits. And I think when you start to dilute that, it takes away from those caucuses. And then I think it is unfair to then keep on adding to the executive committee, to then dilute those voices on the executive committee. And then what happens when some of those are on the executive committee and some aren't, and so then those that get added then are saying, well, that group is now on it, but now I'm not, and then you get into this pissing match with the councils and the caucuses, and it's just unfair. And then I also think it's unfair to the Native caucus, for example, when our states don't appropriately elect Native representation, and then they don't meet this standard of 2% or 3%, and then somehow we're not going to have a Native caucus within the DNC. I mean, that's despicable. So these should be built in.
Right.
Native, Black, Latino, Asian, women's, Stonewall. Those are our core caucuses. Everybody else can create a council.
Frank?
Okay, all right, first of all, as to the last point, as I mentioned, this doesn't affect existing caucuses. It doesn't affect the Native Council caucus, doesn't affect the Disability Caucus, doesn't affect any of the caucuses that have been recognized. Secondly, it's not creating a new process that encourages caucuses. In fact, it's limiting the current process for caucuses, because the current process, which is guided by our 1999 guidance, just says once you meet the criteria of getting 2% of the DNC to sign on, and it's an immutable trait, then you automatically become a caucus. It's not clear. What we're doing is setting a process that, frankly, will make it more rigorous for caucuses to be recognized. And under this process, will any new caucuses be recognized? I don't know. It may be that they're not, but its purpose is not to encourage new caucus formation. It's to standardize the approach to caucus formation, and it absolutely does nothing to undermine the caucuses that do represent the core constituencies of the DNC that we already have.
David?
David McDonald, Washington. Two things. I think we need to keep in mind that the requirement that a caucus propose charter and bylaws changes does not mean that we have to recommend those changes at the same time as we recommend a caucus. There's a separate review process. And so although historically, when a caucus was created, it ended up getting a charter and bylaws change to go on to the executive committee, there's no guarantee we would do that in the future. We might decide to do it or we might not, depending on what we decide to do with caucuses. So I think some of the discussion that Jane correctly identifies that we need to have will end up being had in connection with, are we going to not only create the caucus, but also recommend that charter and bylaws changes it's requesting. And second, I just want to highlight that at the very end of this resolution, there is an affirmative statement that once you meet the criteria, you're no longer subject to reevaluation. So that the question of you had 5% the day you were created and now you're down to 4%, are you automatically taken out of the loop? The answer is no. That may be something that needs to be considered because there may be circumstances in which a caucus's continuing existence as a caucus doesn't make sense, but it's not a requirement that you maintain constant levels of membership.
Andre T.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andre Triber from Texas. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. I actually agree with all the folks that are saying it is important for us to lay this out. So while we're having this conversation, then I think it's important for us to discuss what actually counts as an inherent or immutable trait, because I simply don't think all of our definitions align there. So, for example, I am here, I was elected here via youth council, and I'm chair of the youth council. And I want to be really clear, I'm not using this right now to advocate turning us into a caucus, because I've said the entire time, I'm not touching that because I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to get an exec seat for myself. But when we're talking about inherent and immutable traits, folks often don't count age. And your birth date is something inherent to you that you didn't choose. The movement of time is something inherent and immutable that you did not choose. You are simply your age, and this, of course, also de facto would affect, the senior council as well. It is not something that you choose about yourself. There are also other things that change that we do currently as a party consider immutable traits. Your disability status is something that can change. You can be born with a disability, you can get a disability later in life, and with certain long-term disabilities with treatment, you can actually move past that as well. Sexuality is something that changes. It's a complex spectrum. Many people go through changes through their life of how they feel about their sexuality and can change that definition over time. I fully support, of course, Stonewall being a caucus, but that is something that someone, depending on how they define themselves, can move in and out of. Likewise, gender is something that can be changing over life. So when we're having this discussion, I just simply want to put out there that I want people to think about what counts as inherent or immutable. Just because something can change over your life does not mean it is not, something that would be any more or less inherent or immutable or other. So I really appreciate y'all opening this conversation because I think this is something that is really important to consider. And it is not something that I would pursue, but I think if we're really looking at codifying these things, then the two age-related councils are something at a future date that should be considered for caucus status by way of you simply don't control your age. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Derek?
Can you all hear me? Great. So, Derek Devermont, California, chair of the Disability Caucus, which is one of the caucuses. I think this meeting and the last meeting have highlighted the wisdom of allowing the caucuses to put somebody on this committee. So I commend you on that, Chair Barton. I now see the innate benefit that comes with it. So just a few things I'd like to say as coming from my caucuses. I know it's been said before a number of times, and I just want to hear it again if possible. Nothing in this will affect the caucuses already in existence, including the Disability Caucus, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. With that said, coming from my caucus's perspective, although this obviously won't affect my caucus is one in particular where privacy is paramount, where often people are a member of the community but don't necessarily want to be a member of the caucus because there is often a stigma that comes with certain disabilities, particularly those mental health and otherwise. We've seen that in this caucus ourselves. So when we put, although admittedly a low threshold to become a caucus for the DNC, a low threshold of DNC membership to become a caucus, what it does is for those communities where privacy is paramount, it puts them in a Sophie's choice of either having to waive that anonymity and get representation or be unrepresented and keep the anonymity. And that's a major concern. I can't tell you how many times I've been contacted by DNC members and others just in the community who say, thank you, we appreciate the caucus's work, et cetera, et cetera. I don't generally get out there because I don't want people to know about X, Y, and Z, but thank you, Derek. So I think this threshold might, in certain communities, create that choice. And I don't know if raising the threshold is necessarily a good thing. And the other part where we talk about this is, from my understanding, the purpose of caucuses is to provide representation to communities that might be underrepresented or might have a low populace and therefore need a body to represent them. And by creating thresholds that make it difficult for that already that create threshold to make it difficult for that body to get representation, I don't know if that's what we're really about. And I would just ask us to think about that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mignon,
Derek.
Could I interrupt just long enough? Could we scroll the screen to be on the qualifications that we're talking about adopting as opposed to the
Yes.
ones that we were using for the last 20 years? It's a little confusing to follow the discussion. Thanks.
Keith? Keith?
Yes, Keith Imamoto from California. Really appreciate this discussion, and hopefully people reflect upon it as how important the existing caucuses are to this party. And being the margin of victory for this party by including the existing caucuses. So the real point is, regardless of whether we adopt this or not, if there's going to be another caucus, it's got to come back to the RBC and the full DNC for adoption in charter and bylaw changes. Conversely, if we don't do it, it still would have to come to the RBC and the full DNC for adoptions on amending the charter and the bylaws. I think it is important for us to have sort of a framework. The question ends up being, is it a framework that we be more explicit on the existing ones and the function of them? And as we all know, as the Democratic Party or representatives of members of the Democratic Party, we are here to improve the quality of life of every American. We are seeing, kind of point of privilege. I have a friend whose wife was getting a waiver to be in the U.S. She just had an interview a week ago. He is married to this woman. He is an American citizen. His adopted kids are split. Couple are DACA and couple were born here. We're fighting for them. She is in Mexico. She was denied return to the U.S. She has been working and paying taxes and contributing to this country. And I think that's what we all stand for, and how we look at the organization of this Democratic Party. So we're talking about a means, but let's not forget our goals are in what we stand for in doing this. So just in reflection, I'm not quite sure where I am on this, because any way we look at it, any new caucus has to come back to RBC and the full DNC for changes in the charter and bylaws. And who knows what's going to happen. But I think it's also important, on the other hand, to recognize that there are parameters to the degree that we need to recognize and defend the existing caucuses sometimes, and provide fuel to those that say they want another caucus, because kind of one hand, without this, then we're going to get a million questions on how do I become a caucus, and maybe we're going to get it anyway. But this makes it more explicit. So I'm here nor there, but I just thought I'd make some of those comments, because anything that I look at with this party is, it's tied to the people of this country and the people that work here or have worked here.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you very much. Dennis?
First, let me say to the subcommittee, I'm going to support this. I initially didn't think that it was necessary, that this committee could do what needs to be done with regard to adding caucuses to the DNC. I would ask that the subcommittee consider something similar for councils. I actually think it's probably more important for councils than caucuses. Maybe that's just me. But I would like to ask, because this does, if we do add caucuses, it does require a charter amendment. I have a question for you, David and/or Helen, just because historian over there. Does the charter amendment have to come through the RBC, or can it go directly to the floor?
I believe that we have a requirement that the RBC review all charter and bylaws amendments.
Okay.
It's in the bylaws themselves as
That's
part of the
right.
charter, or the definition of the Rules and Bylaws Committee.
As long as it's there, I firmly believe this committee ought to have a hand in any new creation, period. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Wendy Davis from Georgia. I admire the work y'all put into this and appreciate having a framework. It's part of the important work that this group does. A dear friend of mine who was somebody who helped push and advocate to get the DNC to have a disability council and then was delighted to elevate it to a disability caucus is the vice chair of our constituency groups in Georgia, and he talks about our caucuses and councils being an on-ramp to the party, a way for people to get involved who aren't in the seats that are more, it took a lot for any of us to get into the seat we're in, and the caucuses and councils are supposed to be sort of an easier path, an on-ramp to people who have an excitement and want to be involved in the party, and I think you see that very clearly in our rural councils. So I am joining the folks who have said that I'm a little hesitant to make it harder than it's been. I think it's appropriately hard. It should be appropriately hard because of all the issues of do you get this and do you get that. Would this be an appropriate time to suggest an amendment to that 5% to possibly lower it?
Yes.
I'd like to make the suggestion to lower it to 3%.
Second.
Is there further discussion? Frank?
Yeah, just to put some numbers on it, there are 452 members of the DNC. 2% is 9 people. 5% is 21 people. 3% is 14 or so, maybe 13. Math isn't my strong point. That's why I hate ranked choice voting.
Frank, it is
14.
13 and a half, so it'd be
13
14.
and a half, okay, that's pretty close. Just for context. So that's out of 452 members.
Is there any further discussion around Wendy's amendment?
I have something.
Alicia?
I respect the numbers and the calculation, but it comes back to Chair Kleeb's discussion about it's dependent on folks getting elected in the different ways that they come into the party. And that number could fluctuate. The Native American caucus, for example, that number grows and shrinks depending on how the states send folks to the DNC. And so by elevating this number, we're saying that we want to recognize and acknowledge underserved people, but we're saying you're just too underserved to count because you don't reach these high thresholds. And so I want us to consider that what we're trying to do is represent underserved folks, and by raising the threshold, we are exacerbating the problem, actually, by saying, yeah, you're just still, you're not big enough to be recognized.
Jamie?
Jamie Salzer, North Dakota. I'm support this amendment to drop it to 3%. And I fully agree with President Klebb. I also don't want caucuses forming left and right, so it should be appropriately difficult. I think this resolution does that. If I look at some of the existing caucuses that we have, our country has a history of telling minority groups, just wait and you'll get yours. And something like a caucus is our way of proactively telling these groups, we're not just going to tell you to wait to get yours, we're going to actively include you at the table, even though that table is difficult because it keeps getting larger. And in terms of physical space, we actually need more room. And I get the desire to not necessarily do that. But at the time that the LGBTQ plus caucus was formed, self-identified gay Americans were 2.1% of the population. Native Americans, at the time it was formed, as 0.8%. Today, it's less than 3% of our country is Native American if someone includes some form in their identity. And so by having a 5% threshold, we're telling groups, you have to be overrepresented in the DNC within your group to form a caucus. And if our numbers are so high that we are telling existing, and I know we're not telling existing caucuses you can't form, but by telling them if you didn't already exist, you couldn't exist today, is a real slap in the face, I think, to some of those caucuses. And so I am in support of moving it to 3%. I think it's still appropriately high to make a threshold, but not so high that it becomes impossible to reach.
Is there any further discussion? Carol, do you want to respond? Okay. Is there any further discussion on Wendy's? Okay. Stewart?
Stuart Applebaum, New York. I'm a little confused by the discussion we're having right now. I think part of what I'm hearing is that the purpose of having a caucus is no longer the same for an existing caucus and a new caucus. And but perhaps they should be called something else because they're not trying to achieve the same goals. And we use the Women's Caucus as an example, where it's no longer about underrepresentation in the party, which would be something that would be required for a new caucus that is coming in. I'm also hearing that we want to make this difficult enough so there won't be any new caucuses created. And Jane, I think you did say that. And so I think if that is the case, then what you would want would be something eliminating any additional new caucuses rather than achieving goals that will not be unattainable. I'm concerned as well that the group must not be already represented by an existing council. So if you become a council, you will not have the opportunity to graduate to become a caucus, something that I know some councils have always talked about in the past. I agree with my brother that 5% is too high. And I could think of all sorts of groups that have not applied to be caucuses, whom perhaps we should be encouraging to become caucuses, but will not have the ability to do so with these new rules. I think at the same time, because we talk about caucuses and councils, maybe we need a more comprehensive proposal, talking about councils as well as caucuses rather than just doing half at this point. And so, I mean, my sense personally is that I appreciate the objective of what it is we're trying to do, but I wonder if we may not be ready yet, and we may need more time to prepare.
Frank, do you want to respond to
Yeah,
both
I
the
would.
percentage and to Stewart's comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I don't think we spent a heck of a lot of time on this. I mean, we started with where we are now, which is the guidelines that were adopted in 1999. So it's been 27 years since we've looked at this. We've looked at it here. In response to Stewart's comments, there's language here that says that the group must not already be represented by an existing caucus or continuing council. That means it can be graduated from a council to a caucus, so that addresses that issue specifically. The idea of addressing councils and caucuses at the same time was actually suggested by some people in the committee, but we thought it was easier just to take it one at a time.
And the suggestion has been that we take a look at councils. We can do that. What we're replacing is an old outmoded set of guidelines with a new set of guidelines, plus we're creating a process where there is no process. In order to amend the charter, our rules and bylaws has to act. But otherwise, if a group fills out the criteria, 2% and everything else, then the current guidelines don't say what happens. Do they become a caucus automatically? Basically, Jason has to decide. So putting this in place gives us a framework, and clearly some people think it's too strict, and some people think it's not strict enough, and therefore it seems to me it must be perfect. And as far as, I'm fine with 3%. That doesn't bother me. I think the group would be okay with 3% as well. Those are my thoughts.
Jane, did you want to respond to Wendy's percentage, or did you have something else?
I actually want to make a motion to table. I would like to send this back to the committee so they create a process for both councils and caucuses with clear definitions for individuals who want to create either a caucus or a council. Because right now, it is very confusing to an individual who might want to create a council or a caucus without knowing what process that they should create.
Second.
Okay, Helen, we're going to ask that, so we have an amendment that's already out, and then we just got a motion to table.
Yes, ma'am. The motion to table is in order. It will take the entire main motion away with the pending amendment that can then be discussed by the committee. She actually might be wanting to make a referral motion as opposed to a tabling motion, because the words were sending it back to the committee.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to refer.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, I think we're going to have to do this by a show of hands. All in favor to refer? Okay, do we have the number? Okay, all opposed? It appears that the motion to refer has passed. But I do want to thank the committee for all the hard work they've put into this. Yvette?
I was on the committee, and I do know about the hard work, but what I'm hearing is the confusion. And everybody, I'm listening to people around, say, I don't really know how I feel, which means that we haven't really explained it well. And we owe it just to take a beat if what we did was not articulated well enough for people to support what we did. We owe it to our members to either come back with a different discussion that makes it easier for them to support what happened. I just think that with all of the uncertainty that we are facing as a Democratic Party right now, anything we can do to alleviate uncertainty, we owe it to ourselves to do that. I know that this is not what everybody wants, but I just think that right now we are in a tunnel where we've got to have clarity with every single thing we do, especially with the decisions that we're going to be making this weekend. So if people aren't clear, let's just make sure people are clear.
Thank you, Yvette. Chairman, did you want to say something? Mr. Chairman?
Well, first, I want to thank Frank and Susan, the rest of the committee, for all of their hard work on this. And let me just say, while I appreciate Yvette's comments and others on wanting this to be referred, that my real strong ask of the committee, this committee, is to do something on this, to not leave this as an open answer. I will tell you on behalf of our officers, Secretary Ray and myself, we are besieged with answers to this by groups, organizations, people on the committee who wonder, because our bylaws, our rules, our charter are silent on this issue, how can people actually build power around their community, and for the issues they're concerned about? And because we are not prescriptive in any manner, it leaves it an open question, and one that, frankly, this committee needs to resolve. And so my ask of you is to not leave this open too long. The committee's done some great work on this already. I agree with Yvette, everything Yvette said, that this needs to be refined for sure. But I hope that we can revisit this sooner than later and not leave this an open question, because there are lots of constituencies and organizations who are asking this question. And I'm sure Secretary Ray would agree. On behalf of the two of us, we plead with you to resolve this issue. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Raymond?
Ray Buckley from New Hampshire. Originally, I was going to ask a question of the committee, so now I'm just going to offer an idea, since you're going to be revisiting this anyways. It has been my frustration over the last couple decades regarding the mission of the caucuses. I have long believed, and I have convinced multiple DNC chairs that of this concept, but we have yet to be able to move it forward. And so if you're going to revisit all of this, I would appreciate if you would have this a conversation regarding what is the connection of these caucuses to the state parties. I look around when I attend the various caucuses, I'm a member, and I see talented people. I see people with so much skill and so much ability that we don't actually use in our caucuses, because we show up and we get talked at and then we go away and that's it. Where I think a dynamic and important and critical role that these phenomenal people could play is to support the creation and the existence of these caucuses in our state parties, to be able to make them available to attend either a Zoom meeting or in-person meeting, or go to a convention, or do any sort of event that they have. But it is hard for state parties to keep the caucuses alive and relevant without some sort of support, in my opinion. And that some states don't struggle with this, but the majority of states do struggle with it. And for the states that don't have a caucus system, this would help initiate them and make them, I think, productive members. I absolutely believe that our caucuses represent so much of our party and who we are, and that we should have vibrant, welcoming, and organized and caucuses in all 57 of our organizations, and make that a very vital, important role of our caucuses, is to reach out and communicate and connect with the state with a real mission to it. So I just noticed that, the application is, what's the purpose of the caucus? Maybe we could potentially, and I'll leave it to all of you, expand upon that. On that part of the purpose, it could be to connect with and support the activities of caucuses in the state parties and the creation when they're not. I have seen for decades phenomenal people's talents not being utilized that could be very, very helpful in our state parties.
Thank you. Yvette?
Let me just second that emotion. Let me tell you what. Let me second that, Yvette Lewis, Maryland, because in Maryland, let me just speak for what happens with our caucuses, and I'll tell you why what he said is important. Our AAPI caucus in the state of Maryland is probably one of the most active. Who's the AAPI caucus chair at the DNC? Bell. Right? Our senior caucus is very active. We have Ms. Mabeel, who is all over the DNC caucus. So that connection does determine whether or not you have a strong caucus in your state. So, Ray, I just kind of want to second what you said because I have receipts to basically bear out what you're saying to be true.
Shad?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Shad Mirab, Colorado. I just want to agree with Chair Buckley emphatically on the connection between the Democratic National Committee's caucuses and councils and the state parties is crucial. And I think representation is critically important. That's something we all believe in. I think we also all believe in winning. And these are important and influential seats of power, and they carry a lot of influence. And like the chair said, there's a phenomenal group of people that are waiting for direction and want to be led from these caucuses and councils. And so something that I, as part of the working group, would love to consider with my colleagues there is perhaps also asking these caucuses and councils to submit regular strategic plans about how they plan to reach out to voters, how they plan to shape the conversation and narrative around issues that are so important to so many of us. But without these strategic plans, I think we're going to continue to, as the chair said, with great respect to the caucuses and councils, talk to ourselves and convince ourselves that we're right. And I think that we have an obligation to go talk to the public. We have an obligation to succeed, but we also have an obligation to grow and bring in new voices. And I think requiring those caucuses and councils to really put their heads together on how they're actually going to implement work rather than just come to the meetings and talk to each other, but really focus on talking to voters would be a critical next step for us to actually doing what we all want to do, which is win.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Mignon. David McDonald, Washington. Before we go any further, as I understand the situation we're now in, we still have the existing guidelines on the books. We don't have new guidelines. We could have a flood of applications come in, and we don't know what to do with them. So at a minimum, I guess I'd like to suggest we clarify that we're not going to consider any charter or bylaws amendments to create new caucuses until we have adopted new guidelines. And so I would make a motion, if necessary, for a resolution of this committee that we have a moratorium on creating new caucuses until we've adopted new guidelines.
All in favor? Should have asked if there any discussion around the motion. But it sounds like you all are anxious to pull it through. Keith?
Yes, Keith Malone from California. I think Lottie Shackelford's effort was partially in response for the AAPI caucus creation in '98. I am very positive we needed more than 9 signatures to go before this organization to become a caucus in the first place. It may have changed because Lottie Shackelford, as vice chair, knew that we needed to have certain parameters and did the right thing in doing so. But the AAPI caucus did not only get 9 signatures to become a caucus. That's in reference to the 2%. I'm not quite sure. I thought the LGBTQ plus caucus required more than 9, but Gary says it was 2% when they were reestablished, but I know that the AAPI. Second, Chair Chad mentioned about strategic plan, and during my tenure, it's always been something that we try to revise every other year with the AAPI caucus, and I think that's an important thing to talk from a functional standpoint of all the caucuses. And at the same time, I think in as much as a caucus puts together a strategic plan, I like to emphasize the collaboration is integral to getting that plan done, because a lot of times the plan requires sometimes financial and sometimes human resources, and also sometimes support where the API caucus also has done fundraisers for the DNC. And so in light of all that, I think the function is as important as just the form. And in the discussion, when it goes back to the group, they might want to address the function in as much, because I know that these caucuses have made a difference in electing Democrats. And to do best practices on that function, that we can learn from one another in making each and every caucus, they're great as it is, but greater, because there's no way that this party should accept the House being controlled by the Republicans, the Senate being controlled by the Republicans, the White House being controlled by somebody that doesn't care about us and only cares about his pocketbook, the super wealthy, and corporations, and putting money in their pocket. Well, people are starving, or people want to get ahead but have more barriers in getting ahead. So thank you.
And so just to clarify, I'm going to ask, before I call on Gary, I'm going to ask David to repeat his motion, since we jumped into the vote before we started the discussion, so that we can.
My motion was that the RBC declare that it will not consider any will not consider affirmative recommendations for the creation of any new caucus or related charter and bylaws amendments until it has adopted new guidelines creating a process for considering those applications and the content of such applications.
Is there a second? Discussion. Gary?
Okay, Gary Shea, California. The original motion was that it was a referral to a group, so are we not referring it?
The referral has occurred. This is a motion addressing what happens until we get, between now and when we get a return of the referral, so.
Then, well, what I'd like to do, I mean, this may not be the appropriate time, but I'd like to request that we get the report back no later than the first meeting of this group in 2027, so that it doesn't just simply die. Yes.
Is there a second? Well, we still have, is it a friendly amendment to David's?
I'm not going to regard it as a friendly amendment, because just listening to the discussion here about what's the purpose of caucuses, what's the appropriate standard and so on, I'm not sure that with everything else that's on the subcommittees or working groups agenda, that they can get that done with the general election happening in the meantime. So I think the question of what would be an appropriate time to report back may be a separate question that should be addressed. Right now, I just want to address what's the situation between now and then. Are we inviting people to suddenly rush us with applications under the old guidelines before we come up with new ones, or are we saying, wait a minute, we're not considering anything until we've thought this through? I think the idea is the latter, if I read the committee correctly, but I just want to put it on the record. So
my concern is that because of that motion that we adopted, this could just simply die in committee.
Yeah, my response is very similar to Gary's. The chair, when we talked about the referral, said, we can't just leave this hanging. We have to come back with a decision. And what, respectfully, David's motion is we could come back in 2030 and say, let's talk about new guidelines for caucuses, and we're talking about people wanting to move forward and present to the RBC. The motion referring it and David's motion puts it off, and they can't come back until it comes back to the RBC. But if Gary's, quote, friendly amendment says, we'd like to have 6 months before you guys come back with guidelines, personally, I think that's generous, but, I'd like to see that there's some kind of a guideline that says we need to reconsider this original caucus, motion, so this resolution. So I'm just looking for some type of an end game, as we say.
Jim and I don't know if Jim is on the phone, but Jim and I can actually go to the working group and ask them to prioritize this, Gary, in response to what you're asking. But we can definitely ask that this work is prioritized and not get pushed under the rug. Because the question, as you saw, many people have many questions about this. And I think Frank and the committee has done great work around this. And I'm sure they're not going to let this die. We're not going to let them let this die. So we will prioritize this. Is there any, Yvette?
No, I just wanted to, I was going to second what you said. I mean, the framework is there. We've done work. We just have to make some tweaks and edits to it. It doesn't require a 6-month waiting period. We can get back together, and I know it makes everybody crazy to say that, but.
That's correct. Melissa?
Thank you. Melissa Lopez-Franson from Minnesota. Just wanted to also chime in that I think this current motion on the table is not necessary for the points that everybody's made. And I think having people come forward or potential councils and caucuses come forward would only help inform the subcommittee in terms of the details that they have to take in place to really come back to us with a well-thought-through language. And I don't think suspending that conversation helps us. So I am opposed to suspending evaluation because that's just discussion that we can always say we can postpone ourselves on this committee.
Stuart?
Mignon, this is Jim.
Stuart Applebaum.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jim, can I point a personal privilege? Can I have Jim? Go ahead, Jim.
So I just want to say I am on. I've been following the discussions, and I want to join you in committing to that. You and I will prioritize this, even if there is not a specific deadline for reporting back.
Thank you, Jim. Stuart?
Stuart Applebaum, New York. I agree with prioritizing the discussion on this. I would even hope that perhaps the committee could get together before we meet in Austin. And the RBC can consider what we should be doing when we meet in Austin. But regardless of prioritizing, I think it's a mistake to tie the hands of the RBC about what it is we can and can't do. To vote now that we won't consider caucuses doesn't really add anything. If someone comes up and wants a caucus before there is a definitive set of rules, then we'll evaluate it at that time. We don't have to have a prohibition on new caucuses. I could think of one caucus that we don't have that I think that perhaps we should have, and that would be an immigrant caucus. And I would like to see perhaps an immigrant caucus within the DNC, but now we would be telling them that there can be no immigrant caucus until at some time in the future when we have rules. I also think that as you do the discussion, as Ray has talked about, you have to talk about what the purpose of a caucus is going forward, because that is unclear. We also talk about wanting clarity for the establishment of caucuses. And I would just suggest to you that what we have now about a history of being severely and systemically underrepresented provides no clarity at all. That should not be something that is decided by each of us with our own eyes, the eyes of the beholder. It really needs, it is not clear at all to say severely and systemically underrepresented. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
I just want to be clear, I'm not opposed to putting a date by which the working group should report back. I just want to clarify the situation in the meantime as to which set of guidelines we would be operating under, or if we would be operating on them at all. And I am, the suggestion, for example, that somehow we might do this between now and the August meeting, kind of rush through a discussion of what's the purpose of a caucus, what are the requirements, what are the considerations, on top of everything else that the working group already has on its plate that it has not yet reported out, gives me some pause. So I just think that the discussion of what the deadline ought to be should be separate from the question of, are we going to do anything in the meantime? Are we going to open the door to say, hurry up and get your application in and have it considered at the Austin meeting of the DNC before this gets done, is just leaving, it's an unnecessary ambiguity in our situation. We can't create a new caucus before the August meeting in any event, because we're already past the deadline for submitting a charter and bylaws amendment, which would be necessary under this implied standard. We don't even have a standard about whether you get a seat on the executive committee. We just have always done it. But we don't have it. We don't have a requirement anyplace that happen. That's its own set of policy issues that may relate to how many caucuses we end up needing, what's the composition of the executive committee going forward, and some other issues that just, I would treat the two as separate. Create the moratorium so that we have pressure on ourselves to actually solve the other problem, rather than leave ourselves in the situation of, well, it's a complicated problem, so let's just continue functioning under the ad hoc guidelines and just deal with things as they come up with and never have any clarity, because it's easier to kick that can down the road than it is to force ourselves to come back and actually come up with guidelines. So I'm fine with putting a deadline on, but I just think we ought to separate those two discussions, that's all.
Point of information, I just want to point out that my order was, or my motion was not for the August meeting, but rather for the first meeting of this group in 2027. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Michael changed. Did Michael have his hand up? Is there any further discussion on David's motion?
Oh, I believe that my amendment was seconded.
So let's go back. Would you like to repeat your?
Can I be clear just a second, Gary, before you repeat it?
Yeah.
When Gary first spoke, I thought he was trying to make an amendment to the.
your amendment.
No,
Or
to
to your
he
motion.
wanted a friendly amendment to mine,
Yeah.
but he was referring to the committee reference, refer to the committee. So I'm not sure, are you making a motion with respect to how long a moratorium lasts, or are you making a motion with respect to when the committee has to report back from its referral? Those are.
Two different.
Yeah, and I think if you want to make a motion related to when does the committee have to report back from its referral, that's a separate motion.
If I could be
mine.
recognized after we vote on this, in order to make that a motion as opposed to an amendment, I'd be happy to withdraw it for the moment.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and vote on David's. We're going to go ahead and vote on David's motion. All in favor? Yes, question.
Can we restate the motion, please?
David, for the second time, please.
there's no guarantee it'll be the exact same words, that the Rules and Bylaws Committee not consider any applications for creation of new caucuses until it has received back a further report on the creation of new guidelines. That's a different set of language than the last time I stated it. I'm trying to keep the concept the same, but I can't recall exactly the words I used last time.
I think the discussion around it, though, has been clear. So we can move to a vote. All in favor of David's, we've discussed? Yeah, Stuart, that's what we've been discussing.
And can I continue?
You want a discussion
closed?
again?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned of the message that comes out of this meeting. We're all aware that there is an attempt to create a caucus within the DNC. Regardless of whether or not you think that caucus should be created, the message from this meeting is there is an attempt to create a caucus, and the response of this committee was to create a moratorium on the creation of caucuses. I don't think that is something that we want to be the message of this meeting for dealing with this issue.
Is there any further discussion? Steph?
Steph Completely in New Jersey. I just had a quick question as to what Stuart said. Something that David mentioned earlier was that the creation of a new caucus would require a rule change, and we have already passed that time to receive a rule change for Austin, correct? So a moratorium here would not have any impact on Austin at all because we didn't receive any rule changes. Regardless of the desire to form a caucus, it wasn't submitted in time. So nothing we do here would change that, correct? Okay. But I just wanted to confirm that it will not impact Austin. Thank you.
Before we move to a vote, is there any further discussion around, Derek? Okay.
Derek, Devermont, California. I would say I'm not sure what the virtue is of this motion. Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve, I think maybe I'm wrong, and I don't want to speak for the speaker of the motion, but from what I garnered, the goal is to say it's going to pressure the committee into taking action by excluding people from becoming caucuses and councils. That's what I hear. We're going to exclude people from achieving certain levels of representation in order to force action of the subcommittee. I don't think, I understand the thought process. I don't think that's actually what we do, and I think it runs contrary to the values and the purposes of caucuses and councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Roxanne?
I just have a question, just on this question of the moratorium. So we've already said that we're going to expedite the process around updating this so that we're addressing both caucuses and councils, right? We've all kind of agreed on that we're going to refer it back, we're going to address this in an expedited manner. The chairman said that he and Jason are consistently getting requests, but are you in the process of approving or about to approve any caucuses or councils at the moment? Or can we work through this process and just move forward with this process of expediting it and not do a moratorium? Like, do you feel like a moratorium is necessary at this point, given that we're going to expedite this? And what's at your, like, what requests you're receiving in your office?
Yeah, I know that there are efforts underway and DNC members who are wishing to form a caucus at the moment. Part of our hope with this, and I'm disappointed that this committee delayed action on it, that we actually have a fair and transparent process with it, which is what I know the working group had put together. I get concerned and just really want to focus on making sure that we are being transparent in this to folks around how they can start one, if they want to, what that process lays out. But I know there are folks who are interested in putting one forward. The last two caucuses that we have formed were two councils that got elevated. One was in 2017, when we made the Native Council, the Native Caucus, after they reached the 2% threshold, through Chair Perez's at-large appointments to reach that. And then the other most recent one was 2022, when I certified the Disability Council to become the Disability Caucus, because they had also met the threshold as required. But I know there are, the chair and I get constant requests on a regular basis for folks wondering what's the process for a caucus formation. So having some sort of transparency in this, I think, is just key in this.
So I guess I asked the question just because I don't know that we need a moratorium, given that we've agreed that we're going to expedite this process. So to Stuart's point, is a moratorium necessary if we all agree we're going to expedite this anyway?
Well, the way we will find out whether we need a moratorium, we will move, if the discussion is done, we will move to a vote on this. All in favor, who's got a, oh, Derek has his hand up. All in favor of David's motion for a moratorium, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Well, that seems to be clear. There will be no moratorium, but what will happen is Jim and I will commit to making sure that this discussion is expedited and not tabled, so that people can feel like all these caucuses are being heard, or supposedly caucuses are being heard. Potential caucuses, that's the right word. Well, family, this is the conclusion of our business. And believe it or not, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. That was easy. It has been moved in second. We are adjourned till tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. But we do have lunch. Lunch is at 12:15, and it's about ready. And we'll have further discussions at lunch.
Madam,
I didn't do that.
Madam, is the plan for dinner the same?
Well, we'll get to that, April.